Today I would like to talk about spiritual energy, and really what spiritual energy is, what it is we're referring to in the Labyrinth. When we talk about spiritual energy, the first thing we've got to really look at is what is energy. And most people will say energy is fuel, energy is power, and to a degree this is true, but energy is the result of using fuel, using power in some form to achieve a result. Energy is the result of expanding or extending resources in some way, and then through the use of those resources, having achieved some goal, or having achieved some motion, I should say, or some force of change. So with that in mind, that we get the basic concept of energy. We should look first at physical energy to get an idea of what we're talking about, because the physical is the easiest realm to grasp things in. We all live, work, and play in the physical world. No matter how much we try to get around it, we live in a physical world. Our lives are physical lives, and there's nothing wrong with this. In fact, it's very good, it's very useful that we all have that physical point of view, because it's something that allows us to compare these things to. So with physical energy, you're looking at chemical and leveraging forces. You're looking at the contraction of muscles. You're looking at the pulling in and expanding of air. You're looking at the chemical processes in digestion, in metabolism. You're looking at the chemical and electrical processes that allow your nerves to send signals and receive signals. You're looking at the chemical and physical processes that allow your body to move. And when one has a great deal of physical energy, or a great ability to harness physical energy, I should say, because what we're looking at is harnessing energy that's already there, and then placing better reserves of energy, or more usable reserves of energy. When one harnesses physical energy, they're able to do great things with their body. What we do when we lift weights, when we run, when we do any of those things that are important to us in terms of physical activities, what we're doing is honing a muscle in the body to function in a certain way. We're honing a muscle. We're honing a process more than anything. And this is important to understand this as honing a process of energy use. Because when we see this as a process of energy use, we're going to start to see how this correlates with the spiritual energy in a little bit. But we are focusing a process of energy use so that it is efficient, and so that it can do more with the existing amounts of energy, and so that it can use more energy that's there and convert more energy into form and into function. So we're looking at moving kinetic energy, which is energy that has not been used, into, or rather, we're looking at turning potential energy, I should say, into kinetic energy. We're looking at potential energy which has not been used. That's the energy that's there but is not in action, into kinetic energy, which is energy in motion. And this process is very similar from the body to the spirit. This process is not that different. It uses techniques that are very similar even. But the physical body is increased in its capability to use energy, to turn that potential energy into kinetic energy through repetition of action. That's how we create better efficiency within the physical body. That repetition of action of using physical energy makes the physical body able to do more. We look at mental energy. Mental energy is the ability to move thoughts within the mind. And what I mean by this, it's the ability to problem solve, to think through things. This isn't just like lifting a weight or running. This is different in the sense that it's a different way of using energy in the body. It's a different way of using energy because it's mental. But we do burn through energy. We do burn through the resources we have when we are thinking through problems, when we are looking at things, trying to find a certain point of view, trying to find a way to deal with things in this world. We burn through our existing energy reserves, both physical and spiritual and mental. And the thing is, all of these types of energy that I'm talking about are really interconnected. If you burn through one, you start to pull on the others. But in In mental energy, we are looking at the act of thinking, the act of reasoning, the act of using the power of the analytical mind, of the rational mind, of the thinking mind. Even when you're not completely analytical and completely rational, the thinking mind is still a powerful tool. We're looking at basically the use of that to shape a situation within our mind to find a result or an answer or a solution to a problem. So what the mental energy really is then is what we're talking about is taking that potential of the mind and converting it to the kinetic use of the mind to do things. You do this when you do math, but you've become so good at math that it's very efficient for you. You are so good with mathematics and spelling, reading and writing that these things, oh, that's so very simple. Well, that's because you've honed that muscle. You've honed that process so that it uses very little energy, uses very little spiritual, mental, or physical energy for you to do these things. But if you think back to when you were a kid, it was terribly difficult. It was hell on earth to learn to read and write. If you can remember that far back, then you know it was a pain. But if you can't remember that far back, you know, you can definitely remember high school, and you can remember the introductions to the upper levels of math. And even if you had difficulty with them, what you'll find was that it was because some of the basic skills were already lacking. In other words, the efficiency level of the most basic skills were lacking, so the more advanced skills became more difficult. This is very interconnected because spiritual energy works in the same way. Okay? If repetition builds physical energy, and repetition and efficient methods of thinking and analysis build mental energy, then, in a sense, the efficient use of the spirit through the mind and the body builds spiritual energy. So, if mental energy is the act of thinking, when we talk about, using that mental energy as the act of using thought, and using physical energy as the act of using the body, then spiritual energy is the act of using focus. Not just thought, not just dancing around and looking for a solution, but we're talking about taking an image, or taking a feeling, or taking a sensation and focusing on it, willing it. That is the act of using spiritual energy. But then the question still remains, what is spiritual energy? I can break down chemical energy in the body, and to a degree I could break down mental energy into processes, into thoughts per second, kind of like megahertz in a computer. Breaking down spiritual energy is far more difficult, not because it is less there. As you've seen, going from physical to mental energy became more difficult. We have to use a comparison. We have to change a way of thinking. Spiritual energy is very much the same way. But the easiest explanation of spiritual energy is almost always chi energy, which is life force energy. And this is the energy that's inherent within the body. It's already tied into mental and physical on a very root and deep way. Everyone's using chi, everyone's harnessing chi, and everyone's expelling chi to a degree. But the efficient harnessing, the efficient storage, and the efficient expulsion of chi, that's more difficult. That takes time, and it takes training, and it takes repetition. And really, repetition is the prime tool in all of this. I usually say training is the prime tool, and when I say training, I mean repetition. As I'm recording this, I've got my weights sitting here. When I'm done recording this, I'm going to be lifting weights because that repetition builds muscle. But I've also meditated already today for 15 minutes, and that repetition built energy, built a type of internal mental energy, an internal spiritual energy. So what chi is a life energy. It's that thing beyond chemical and beyond physical, beyond mental, that lies just outside our understanding. So I guess I could say that what we're saying is, what is spiritual energy? Before we say anything else, what is spiritual energy? And what I'm telling you is it's not an easy task to grasp, but you're already very deeply aware of it. You're deeply aware of when you focus on something, how you can build up momentum to move yourself towards it or to move things around it, to get other things to kind of coincide. We've all done that to a degree, but what we're talking about today is the why and the how. And the why is because wherever focus goes, so does energy. And the first thing with learning Qi is that by focusing your thoughts, your attention, more than anything, not just thinking, oh yeah, I've got an arm. You don't just think the word arm. You focus your mental attention on your arm. You can move your Qi into your arm. When you make a muscle, when you lift something, whenever you tense the muscles, that is an act of Qi as much as it is an act of physicality. And it could also be said that it's an act of mentality. All of these things are interconnected. I could make a really good case that there is no separation, but for the person learning this, that separation is very vital. Because without that separation, one focuses only on one aspect, and that aspect never really takes off as well as the person would like. So, when it comes to moving energy, it's really more an act of focusing it. Wherever the focus is where the energy has to go. And that is kind of a mental process, but a very spiritual process because it's the act of also feeling it. You know, spiritual energy may be the most undefined concept, and yet it's really very basic and really very simple. We see children do this all the time. You've seen children try to do something, and you can see them scrunch their face up and literally try harder to do it. They won't change the process of what they're doing. They won't change their action directly, but they will try harder to achieve whatever it is they're trying to achieve. And what that is, that's them instinctively using the process of spiritual energy, instinctively harnessing that power inside of themselves to try to resolve it. And usually what that does is it leads them to exhaustion. It creates a kind of burnout. But a lot of times we see kids all the time just kind of get things in a way that we don't, but you can see them struggling with it right at that moment. That is the buildup of that focus to cause a change in their reality. That is that raw focus creating change in the world around them and change in the self. Now when we talk about spiritual energy, we've talked about the body and spiritual energy, Qi being the most basic form. But we also need some examples of spiritual energy. What happens with this energy? You know, we say focus. What you're focusing on puts energy in that place. So what happens when spiritual energy starts getting shifted around, or if it's really high in a certain way? Well, the best example would be ghosts. You have someone whose spiritual energy, their spiritual presence, their focus is so intense. Their connection, their drive, their raw willpower is so intense that what they've done is they've left an imprint of their energy. They've ingrained it into the surroundings. So when you look at ghosts, that's another form of that spiritual energy in work, because their thoughts went to a place and then really dug themselves in. Psychic phenomenon, I believe, is a form of spiritual energy also. It is a form of spiritual energy that is being reflected in a mental process, much as ghosts are a form of spiritual energy which is being reflected in a physical process. But if we're completely honest with ourselves, the physical and mental are part of the same system, as is the spiritual. We make this division because it makes it easier to grasp. But if taking that easier to grasp concept, whenever someone has a psychic moment, what that is a moment of intuition, or a moment where they just get a feeling about something. And it's hard to describe that feeling because it's not like an actual reasoned, rationed thought. And it's not exactly like a physical sensation. It's not like you feel someone beat you upside the head and knocked you to the ground. You're like, whoa, I sense that we have problems coming ahead. No, it's more of an internal discourse, an internal offsetting that gains your attention. That falls into hunches. It falls into a type of ESP, but it can also be made use of for enhanced sensory perception. We've all done this. You know, you're listening, and what you do is you close your eyes and you focus on your ears. You think about how you feel sound in your ears. You recognize that it is a feeling. It is that feeling of that vibration, and you enhance your ability to hear. We've all done that to some point in our life, and what that is, that's directing spiritual energy to heighten a sense. It's directing that spiritual energy to cause an effect. Now, the next one most people have not done, and this one I've only seen a few people that have done it, though I've met people who do it naturally. And it's the generation of heat from the body, where a person can warm their hands. In fact, I've met a person whose hands are always warm. Their face freezes, middle of winter, and I kid you not, this is the middle of winter. They came in and they said, I got something neat to show you. I'm like, what's that? And they put their hand on my arm, and I'm like, you were outside. I asked them, I said, do you have any kind of spiritual training? They said, nope, just this has always been the way it was for me. And this is a really high energy person. This is the kind of person you can kind of see that they've got the energy pouring off of them. But likewise, for those of us who've studied the martial arts and forms, there's also that moment where you feel movement before it happens, where you can feel a person moving almost in the ether. You can feel what they're about to do, and you can just kind of feel, you really become one with them, and that too is a type of spiritual energy. It's a type of premonition. And if you've noticed, what all of these things have in common is that they're very hard to describe. What they are is they are a sensation which is not physical, yet is represented through physical words for lack of any other words. They are sensations which are not mental, but they are expressed through mental vocabulary for lack of better vocabulary. What all of this is, these are examples of that spiritual energy, because you've got to know what it is before you harness it. And now you gotta be wondering, well, why would I want to harness this anyway, And why is the Labyrinth coming at this as the first topic, This is our first major topic for a live show, and the reason we're coming at this first, and the reason that you're going to be hearing this one pop back up through the weeks, is because there are so many benefits to it, and it is the key foundation. If there was a keystone to what I do with mysticism and energy work and psychic processes, if there was anything that I could say, yeah, that's what it is, it's the harnessing of spiritual energy. It's the harnessing of that power, and you feel it moving about you when you learn to feel it. And the first step to learning to feel it is really awareness of yourself and of that. But we'll get into an exercise for that in a little bit. Let's look at the other benefits. Beyond the ability to use mysticism, why else would one be concerned with spiritual energy? Well, because it makes you better in terms of health. It gives you a stronger body, a clearer mind, gives you the ability to deal with life's problems in a more efficient way. The skills that are gained from it allow you to avoid problems in day-to-day life, and even if you don't actively seek those skills, the act of increasing the efficiency of your spiritual energy output, the act of increasing the amount of spiritual energy you have available to draw on, will allow you to get a sense of things, even with no other training. It'll give you a feeling as to what's going to happen and what is happening. And from that, you can avoid problems in the day-to-day life. You can also reduce your level of stress. When one's spiritual energy is flowing freely and to its fullest potential, stress becomes a non-thing. It's not really a factor in that person's life, and it expands their mental capacity. You've seen people do this without realizing you've seen do it. They take a deep breath and they just kind of focus on a problem. They are drawing on those spiritual reserves to fuel that mental ability. Finally, within learning to control spiritual energy and learning to harness it, the pinnacle of this would be the ability to heal others and to help others through sensing their problems, sensing their moods, having a better connection to them, but also the ability to help them, kind of tune their life to a degree, help them to do things that will make them feel better if they're in any kind of pain or if they're having any kind of problems. Not necessarily just physical healing, but we're also talking about life healing here. We're talking about when a person's life needs a little bit of first aid added in, and spiritual energy is a great kind of first aid in that. And I should say, not just the ability to heal others, but the ability to heal yourself. So, we've got a good foundation as to what spiritual energy is and why it is. But how can you recognize it in other people? Or how can you recognize it in yourself? What are some traits to it? Well, when spiritual energy is running low, you'll be aware of it. You'll be aware of it because you're going to feel run down, or the person you're observing will look run down. Kind of a tired, weakened state, especially emotionally. You know, spiritual energy is very connected to emotions. Emotions are a kind of fuel for the spirit. And when one is weakened emotionally or physically, you can tell that there's some kind of lack of flow of that spirit energy in there. You know, you've seen people with the glossed over look, or where you look in their eyes and they just don't seem like they're completely there that day. They look like they're kind of like they say the hamster's on the wheel, but he's dead, you know? There's just that lack of something. Now, in contrast, when one has massive amounts of spiritual energy, when they are filled with it and it is flowing freely and properly, the person becomes vibrant, happy, full of life, vigorous and healthy. They feel very strong. And even when someone has an illness or injuries, they can still have a high spiritual energy. Spiritual energy cannot heal everything. There is a limit to what it does, but on the other side of that, there is no limit to what it allows the person to feel. It is a change in the way their internal world works. And even someone who is in terrible state can have a really high spiritual energy. They can have a really deep level of spiritual power, and as a result, they will not let the illness or the problem get them down. They will instead stand up against it. They will instead be strong and capable, even in weakness. Even at a point where they lack those things that we would commonly want to associate with this. So that really gives us kind of a look at spiritual energy, and I promised I'm going to give you a basic exercise. This is just something you can do. It takes 15 minutes a day. You can break it up into 5-minute intervals if you really need to. But getting even just 15 solid minutes a day in is going to help. And it's a basic deep breathing exercise. You just breathe in through the nose, really deep. You try to you want to fill to your feet is the way a lot of people put it. You want to breathe in so deep. You just want to breathe all the way in. You want to take all of the energy and move it in all the way down into your trunk, all the way down into the trunk of your body, all the way down into the bottoms of your feet. And then you take all of the stale energy and you kind of just feel it inside of you. And you take and you pull it up, and when you exhale, you just kind of let it out. Just kind of let that stale negative energy out of your body so that you can resume a vibrantness. And you continue this deep breathing. And a lot of people ask with any deep breathing exercise, should I focus on nothing or should I focus on something? And the answer is invariably yes. And what that boils down to is it depends on what you're most comfortable with. Some people prefer to do such exercises, and instead of doing the deepest breathing, to hum a mantra with them. Others prefer to clear their mind of all visualization so that nothing is happening in the mind. As the eyes are closed and you're sitting there relaxed, the mind is a blank slate, or it is as blank as you can make it. And that's viable. That's functional. It works. It does what it's supposed to do. But by the same token, there are other options within that. And one of those options is to really just kind of picture a white light, a bright white light as you're doing this. And this is one of the methods that I prefer. And you go through the same basic deep breathing exercises, but you picture on this white light, and it might not be very bright at first. It might not even have a whole lot to it. But as you breathe, you don't have to make it brighter in your mind's eye. But as you breathe, you will notice it becoming brighter. You will notice it filling up until it becomes blindingly bright, until your vision starts to become impeded. And I'll tell you this, I've had moments with this type of meditation where I thought I was looking into a sun lamp. I thought that someone had came in and put a flashlight in my face. So this kind of meditation is good. This kind of deep breathing meditation with the white light helps you, really harness and fill up with that chi. And if you've got to wonder about where to focus at on your body, focus at the very root of your body. Go to the most center point that you feel in your body and keep your mind focused on that point. Keeping your mind focused on that point, the energy will flow there and restore the reserves. By the same token, as a healing exercise, this type of meditation, this type of spiritual energy work could be focused on any injured limb to provide some level of increased healing. However, as always, be rational and reasonable with all of this. None of this can replace a good doctor's advice, but it can help augment an existing regimen. That's really it for this segment, Just remember, spiritual energy is that energy of focus, that energy of willpower, that energy of feeling, and being harnessed through raw focus and determination. That's really what this energy is, and when we talk about this, you're going to notice that a lot of things that I present are going to hinge on this.